Hi, I'm Joyce Harper, and I want to welcome you to season 4 of my podcast, Why Didn't Anyone Tell Me This? Together with expert guests and those with lived experiences, we will give you some tools to empower you to live a life of good health and happiness. This is the last podcast in the mini series in conversations with some of the very wise women I've interviewed for my book. And I'm really pleased today to talk to Julie Angel, who is a movement coach, artist, award winning filmmaker, and author. And what are you going to hear about? You're going to hear about movement, parkour, the importance of creativity, the importance of rest. Julie has done lots of work encouraging women to move, and you are going to love this conversation about how we need to take small steps to improve our health and our aging. Enjoy. Welcome, Julie.
Thank you, Joyce. Pleasure to be here.
So, Julie, you've done lots of amazing things in your life and you've done lots of things to help women, which we're going to dig into in this podcast today. But let's start by you telling us a bit about your amazing life so far.
Oh, I don't know. That's very kind. I guess if I have to reflect and look back on my kind of life and career, the from a lot of people have said to me like, "Oh, you've done lots of different things." As in, I've been a filmmaker. I've traveled. I've worked on video games, and then I became a movement coach, and all of these things connect. For me, they're all the same. They're all just about creativity, imagination, storytelling, and kind of having a bit of fun along the way. I'm definitely not what you would call a yes person. So even if it makes life, harder or more complicated, and even though, I loved filmmaking, I realized, well, I'm not really suited for a full time job in television. Like, I'm not going to pretend that, okay, this thing that we're doing is, has the same gravitas as, finding a cure for malaria. I'm just going to be like, no, I'm going to go and try something differently. So, I think, my career kind of changed. When I was doing independent filmmaking, which meant I was really just doing projects about people, places, and things that I found interesting. I did a lot of projects about different artists. And then a friend of mine asked me to help him make a documentary in Southern California all about pool skaters. So this was about people who search and find out round bottom swimming pools. They drain them, they clean them, and then they skateboard in them, and then they leave. And for me, it was the first time there had been this kind of physical body element and environmental element to kind of this more, rebellious artist type streak. So it was like, wow, they're using things in ways they weren't designed for, but they're moving in these spaces. And basically, so the documentary is called Chlorine. It was very well received. And then at the end of making Chlorine, and it was like self-funded again, kind of, guerrilla filmmaking type approach. Um, and I then ended up kind of, going, what's next? And I basically found at SOAS in London, there were evening classes in visual anthropology. And this just lit up my brain like nothing had ever lit up my brain before. And Dr. Charlie Gore, I remember on the first night, and you're all doing an introduction. And, like, okay, Julie, what do you do? And I was like, oh, I'm a documentary filmmaker. And everyone was like, well, do you make anthropological films? I was like, I've got no idea. That's what I'm here to kind of find out about and maybe study. And basically, those evening classes changed my life. They like I would, be on the tube on the way home and like having so many ideas and writing them down on like little receipts and everything. And I did the course 3 times. It was that good. And it got to the point of like, okay, like I really should either do something else, or obviously this visual anthropology thing, is a good fit for me. And I ended up then being off, like I looked for a master's, I got offered one at Goldsmiths, and then there was one at Brunel University, and I went to meet Mike Wayne, who was running it, and he basically said, "Well, this thing you did with this other documentary, that's basically a master's. So, have you ever thought of doing a PhD?" And I was like, "No, I mean, like, I'm not an academic. I'm an art school, move around, travel kind of person." But I did love in these evening classes the philosophy. I loved the all this kind of like French theory. And to cut a long story short, I put a proposal together and got accepted for a practice-based PhD at Brunel. And to begin with, it was going to be about a whole host of kind of lifestyle, urban sports type things. There was like urban golf and buildering, and parkour was only just like one tiny element of it. And that was in 2004. And after the first kind of time going out and meeting a group who were doing parkour, I realized, like, no, this is going to be the whole thing. This is going to be like the focus. And so I did it part time. I made 52 short films. One of my supervisors was like, "Julie, you really need to stop making films and, like, start writing." And I was like, "Oh, like that wasn't my energy at the time." I was like, "No, I'm like outside and moving around." And the thing is that when you're around people who move a lot, it makes you want to move. And the people I was kind of, my field work, my research participants, they were 20 years younger than me. They were male. They were what I would call more natural athletes. They didn't have a coaching system. They didn't, I didn't really trust them to, teach me. And also I was kind of too shy to try as well. I had some, like street cred as the filmmaker. And then, like, yeah, I didn't want to kind of ruin this balance. But then a new member came on that team whose background, he was older, he was more mature. He had an elite athletic background. He was a national soccer player and swimmer in France. He had a, personal training background. I was like, okay, I can say yes to him guiding me, teaching me. And then, basically that this was just a very my own little personal movement journey that happened alongside the filming. And then, I finished the PhD, and at the end of that, everyone was like, "Oh, what do you want to do? What's going to happen next?" I was like, "I don't know. I just want to not be doing a PhD." And I
I
just
know
want
the
something
feeling.
nice to happen. Yeah, it was, the last 2 years were just like, you're quite solitary, and you're just like, read, write, review, read, write, review, read, write, review. And during the kind of, I guess, the tail end of all my filming for the PhD, I was invited to other, what I would say, like movement cultures. So because my background, I had a professional filmmaking background, then I had this anthropological kind of framing, which meant I was always interested in what can other people understand from the way these people see the world. So I was then introduced to kind of like the natural movement world, and everything was an exchange. It was like, "Hey, Julie, do you want to come and we need some promotional videos. Do you want to come and spend, some time in Thailand?" And I was like, "Yeah." And like, I've always wanted to do your retreats, but, like, I don't have any money. And they were like, "Oh, just come and we'll host you and you film stuff and you can join in." And so everything was very informal. But I ended up kind of collecting experience and certificates. And then um, ended up kind of really realizing I just want to be outside moving around all day. Like that's my dream job. I just want to be playing outside. And there was no plan. It was all, again, very informal, just friends being like, "Oh my God, like, you do that stuff?" And I was like, "Yeah, I'm not very good at it. Like, don't have any ideas of any special athleticism." It was just, but yeah, like, come and join me. So, I ended up sharing things with a few friends. And then that led to, like, oh, can I bring my other friends? And then why don't you run a workshop? And I was like, oh, okay, you know, like, again, never a clear plan. Um, but it evolved. And then it was like, do you know what? I think I want to be a movement coach. And so that's what ended up happening. And it's really no, I mean, it is different, obviously, but in terms of is, you know, does it, is there a lot of familiarity with filmmaking, with working on video games, all that kind of stuff? Like, yes, it's about being curious. It's about saying hello to things. It's about listening. It's about then creating and adapting. So, yes, you have a body, yes, you have the environment, but then, you know, the studies and the filmmaking ended up being, I want everyone to see the world as a playground. I want people to dare to be creative in everything they do, but then to also listen to themselves. I don't feel like I come from a fitness background, and I'm really happy about that. I want to share with women that it's really possible to create your own sustainable movement culture, that you can find ways to move that bring you joy, that are going to make you stronger, more physically able, more resilient, that kind of confidence, or just, and also the ease of just being able to move through the world in a way that feels okay. So you're not kind of guarded or protected. And the thing is that we need to kind of understand for ourselves, like, well, what kind of movement culture works for me? So, for example, I'm a socially confident introvert, and I spend a lot of time on my own with my dog, and I love moving. And my preference is to move outside, you know, ideally in nature, ideally barefoot. But, you know, that's not always possible. And so I can also go and move in a gym, but I can do it in ways that are adaptable, that are creative. And so if someone says, you know, like, oh, I just took up running, and I'm like, oh, great. You know, do you love running? And they're like, no, I hate running. And I'm like, why are you running? You know, like, you can start to define and find ways to move, because there are so many ways to move. And I think coming from a creative industries background instead of a fitness background has been my greatest gift for becoming a movement coach. Because, you know, if you love the, you know, sets and reps and push-ups and pull-ups, like, there's value to all of this. It's not like you don't have to, like, you have to choose one approach over another. It's really like what resonates, you know. Some people like to be in that kind of collective flow state of, I want to be in a team. And other people are like, no, I like solo, you know, lifestyle sports. And other people are like, I want rules, I want a uniform, I want time. And for me, I think I'm like, I call myself, I'm a high performance slacker. So I'm pretty lazy. It's very hard to get me to do things I don't want to do. And so I'm very, like, a friend of mine, who was one of my movement coach, he was always saying to me, like, oh my gosh, Julie, like, you have more excuses than a pregnant nun. And I was like, what do you mean? Because I'm always like, oh no, like, I can't do that, I'm too tired for this, I'm too tired, you know, da da da. So we all have these friction points. And I realized, like, I'm a master manipulator of creative friction points. So anything that for me is like, well, you can only do that, but it only happens on a Tuesday at 7 p.m. and you have to drive there. I'm like, phew, probably not going to happen very often then. But if there are ways to move, so for example, I sit, like, where my desk is, I have training clothes on the chair next to the desk. Because if I have to go and get something out of a wardrobe, if I have to go up the stairs, those way too big of friction points. It's so easy for me to go, no, I'm not going to do it. So we can really set ourselves up for success by starting to discover, like, what are the friction points. Number one is, have you found, like, a move, you know, ways to move that fit you? Are the ways you're moving giving you more energy or less? How available are to you? Do they fit into your life? So like I love surfing, but surfing, not only is it physically difficult, the logistics of having a regular surfing practice in your life. Are there waves? Are there weather? Is it the right time of day? Are you available? It's like it's so hard, which is why, when people go on holiday, they surf. And but you need a very flexible lifestyle to be surfing regularly. So I think the combination of all these different influences of all these different systems were were what have kind of like, so what I offer people today, it's like it's the best of everything I've learned in the past 25 years, for sure.
I really love everything you say, and I love the way that you are bringing movement and creativity together. I just think those two to me are really non negotiable, but also getting this message across that we are all individuals. So it's movement is not just about running or going to the gym. And I think that's really given it a bad rap. And the fact that you've explored things like parkour and just being outside in nature. Can we go back to parkour actually? Can you explain what parkour is? Because there's quite a few people that don't know. I've got three sons, so I know what it is, but I think there's a lot of people out there that might
Yeah,
not know what parkour is. Tell us what it is.
yeah, sure. So parkour, sometimes it's known as free running. In France, it's also known as l'art de déplacement. And basically, you may have seen it in um, as a stunt sequence in a film. You may have seen clips on YouTube of people looking like Spider-Man, but without a costume, of like being able to run up a wall and jump from one ledge to another, to be able to jump from one railing to another, to have this, it's kind of like if Jackie Chan met Spider-Man and put him in some like modern street clothing, you've got something that could look like what a lot of young males do as parkour, and it has a very spectacular side of it. And so it's really like how do you overcome obstacles. It has a history rooted in a thing called method naturelle, which was, and there's a history behind that, which was kind of like how the fire service was created, of this very functional fitness, that even links back to Georges Herbert, who was looking at indigenous populations and how they move, their movement agility, their physical capacities to be able to crawl, walk, run, climb, jump, squat, throw, catch, fight, swim, like being the generalist in the movement world, kind of taking that and then putting it in any environment. How do you move over, under, through? So, like I said, there's a very spectacular side to it, which is incredibly impressive. Of, like I said, people jumping off things and jumping over things, where you're like, oh my gosh, how could their knees take it? But there's a very dedicated kind of physical conditioning that happens behind it as well. And the other thing is that whilst people think of, there's I think it's a very lazy label of like, oh, adrenaline junkie. And it's like, there could not be anything further from the truth. There are very low injury rates in parkour because it is considered, it is intentional, it is a very emotional practice because it's body centric. When you have risk and challenge, you are not interested in being reckless. You're interested in moving tomorrow. You're not just interested in, can I do this movement today? And so when you're doing parkour, and there can be, I'm a 56-year-old woman. I know people in their 60s and 70s, but you don't hear and see much from us. Because, like I said, the spectacle of parkour is spectacular. It is really impressive. It is like what the human body is capable of is phenomenal. And it has really stretched the boundaries. It has moved the benchmark. It has moved the goalposts of what we thought was possible. Um, but the reality is, if you can get out of bed and move and walk, you can do parkour. It doesn't need to be big. It doesn't need to be spectacular. It could be a line on the floor. It could be like, you're in the airport and there's the big snake line that you have to go through, but you could just duck underneath. You know, that's a kind of parkour type thing of like, well, I want to take the race line. How do you get from A to B as fast as you can? So the popularity of things like Ninja Warrior, parkour athletes have dominated that. A lot of climbers as well, actually, because it's mainly upper body strength. But when Ninja Warrior first came out, especially in the UK, the winners all had a parkour background. So, and everyone from the world was like invited to go on Ninja Warrior. Um, so you are going to improve your balance. You are going to do those things. But for me, the most interesting thing of parkour was this kind of personal transformative thing where every day you go to move and there's an obstacle. You could be in the woods or a park and like, oh, how do I move over that log or branch? You could be, like I said, ducking over and under things. It doesn't have to be about, like, I've never trained up on a jump rooftops or anything like that. I'm like, no way. Like, um, so there's all these other ways to move in and around your environment and see opportunities for play and challenge. And I think that play element is the thing that also has been missing from movement cultures for a lot of people. And the people, kind of going, well, I'm not into sport. I'm like, well, you don't have to be into sport to be into movement. You don't have to be into exercise to be into movement. And parkour opens up this whole other realm of um, going back to that inner child who wanted to like walk along the wall, the small wall instead of the pavement, because it's far more interesting. And yet every adult went, get down from there, And so the invitation is, well, why don't you can say hello to that small wall and go up on it. And I don't believe that people are reckless. Like there may be an anomaly, but most people are not interested in getting hurt. They will consider, well, how am I going to get up there? Well, then I need to think about how am I going to get down from there. And so parkour has these transformative elements of you're faced with an obstacle. You can search out these challenges. You can search out an obstacle. And then when you're in this kind of silent dialogue with how am I going to achieve this, you get to see who you are in that moment. And any other kind of, you have to really be present. It's something that's only like now. And I think a lot of modern life pulls us away from being really present with ourselves, of who we are at our core, our very authentic self. So, if you're walking on a railing, you are not thinking about the shopping list. You are not thinking, yeah, but I'm a published author. Like, yeah, but I'm this, yeah, but I'm that. It's like, it is completely irrelevant. It is about you and the railing and that movement. And how do you manage your emotions? How do you manage your fear? How are you organizing your body? How is this interaction? What is that bringing up for you? That for me is the appeal and the most interesting side of parkour. Someone who's like, oh, how big is your jump? I'm like, I don't know. And I have no interest in finding out. But that's just me. I don't have what I would call a sporting ego. So for me, movement is just about finding joyful inquiry into who I am and therefore who I can be. Because also, like, if you're moving on a bench or a railing, if that bench is no longer, quote, just a bench, if that bench is a playground of opportunity to see how you can move, how you can create a flow or a sequence of moves, how you can test your landings, your balance, your jump, like all of these things. If that bench isn't just a bench, then maybe your sense of identity is also not as limited as whatever limitations you have put on yourself. So during my PhD, I thought, at the end of it, like, oh, I'm going to come up with something really clever because I've been thinking so hard for so long, like I have a headache thinking about this. And at the end of it, it was like, it's just identity, not just identity, it's identity. So parkour reveals who you are in the moment when you're in relationship with the environment. It invites you to have this curious, playful, or challenging. It can be also like an opportunity to test your limits, but you don't have to be doing that every day. But it really, like, once you've kind of unlocked this idea of the world is a playground for you to move in and around on, you can't unsee that. And that meant for me, like where I was living in London at the time, for example, there was an area I would walk past from the tube back to the house, and I always found it like unsettling. I didn't feel safe walking through this area. I was, kind of like, "Ugh, I wish there was another route." But then one time our parkour class went to this area, and then it was like it changed my relationship to not just that area socially, but like to the walls, to the texture. So it's this multi-sensory relationship with the environment as well. And I was like, oh, that spot around Latimer Road, like I love it. Oh, there's this great wall and there's this slope, so you can like warm up and it's gradual and you can do this and do that. So you have this renewed appreciation for details in the environment. Like you touch the ground, um, you're in relationship with it. You're not removed. So you're not just like, oh, this is a nice area to sit down and have a sandwich. You're like, oh, how could I move there? And what would it feel like? And then, so you're creating these personal relationships with the environments that we're otherwise just passing through on autopilot. And so that creates a very different, a very rich experience and a sense of ownership about where you live, because you have this active instead of very passive engagement with the spaces around us.
That's just such a brilliant way. I think the word play that you've used a few times is just so important. It's something I always say as well, and bringing that creativity in. Now, you've worked with so many women. What are the main hurdles you find with trying to encourage women to think about movement and creativity?
I think the main thing that I've noticed is a lot of people have this idea that, well, yeah, I know that it worked for them, but I don't think it's going to work for me. And until you can really um, convince someone or that they're ready for change, um, that's the biggest obstacle. Because we can, the research shows us we can build muscle at age 104. 104. So the argument of like, well, I'm too old, it's like, no, that's not the reality. It may be a convenient truth for you to sit in the procrastination you're in right now, um, but there, it's not factually correct. We are a neurophysiological use it or lose it system, which means there's always something really tiny that we can restart to do. And interestingly, the other biggest obstacle is that people don't have energy. They're like, I'm tired, and people are very disconnected from their body, so they're living in a very cerebral, intellectual, or anxiety kind of filled way of being. And interestingly, the movement skill that is the lowest hanging fruit that changes everything for everyone is how we breathe. So a lot of the time, if you can even just change how someone's breathing, they will start to then think differently about what's possible. And it's just that so many people are stuck in a kind of a negative feedback loop of, I don't have any energy, I'm really tired, I feel terrible about myself, my body feels like an alien, like I feel stuck and I feel stiff. That's a really hard starting point. But if you can then say, okay, we're going to do some nasal breathing and we're going to do this, and then you're going to practice these drills, for a couple of weeks, and then they're like, I'm sleeping better. Actually, my neck and shoulders don't feel as stiff. And it's like, yeah, you're
Yeah,
not chest breathing, you're not, caught up like that. And then the anxiety lessens a little bit. And then also, like, well, you can go up the stairs carrying your shopping bag and you don't feel out of breath anymore. Because there's nothing like doing everyday tasks and being out of breath to make us feel older than our years, stuck, and chipping away at our confidence and our belief that we're capable of change. And every single person is. There's always something that we can do. And a lot of the time, there hasn't been either the right um, guidance of this is the next step for you, because what the next step is for one person can be completely different to someone else. So if you've had multiple injuries and bereavement and you haven't moved for a long time, your next step is going to be very different than someone who's been doing CrossFit, has had a couple of injuries, but they're raring to go. So that subtle, like, what's the next 1% thing I can add on, is the sticking point. And this mental reframe of, please believe that change is possible for you, because it is. And it's just how we approach the kind of body's hierarchy of needs. So every cell in our body needs oxygen and glucose. If those things are off through how you're breathing and maybe your nutrition, your metabolism is stuck, then, like, if you put me next to that other person, if we were both lying on the sofa doing nothing, I may still have 10 times more energy than them whilst doing nothing.
yeah. I think there's
It was saying
a
trying to
lot to unpack there.
disconnect.
What you, yeah, not I. The biggest hurdle I'm seeing women tell me is I think some have given up. That those, especially those that haven't really moved or
Mhm.
exercised through their life, and they feel they're aging and they feel their body has just gone. And but I'm also
Mhm.
hearing in the same room a number of women who have decided to change that and to make
Mhm.
this part of their lives, and they are reaping the benefits. So I think your message is it's really never too late, but we are all different and we do need to take small steps. And one of the things you talk about a lot, and if anyone hasn't watched any of your videos, they're so motivating and so inspiring. So please, can everyone go and watch Julie's brilliant videos? But you do talk about movement snacks. So tell us about movement snacks and why this is important for women.
Yeah, so movement snacks it's more than an exercise break. So a movement snack is, number one, it doesn't sound like a workout. So, and it doesn't have to be, and it isn't. And so, with our kind of the way our mind and body are connected, and I always follow Ellen Langer's work on this. It's mind body unity. It's not even a connection. It's just unity. So when our mind is already going like, oh, like, I'm tired. I don't want to do a workout, then you will actually be more tired than even you are just by having that thought. So a movement snack is like, it's an invitation to do a tiny bit of a tiny thing. And so basically, if you want to create change, just start small, start really small. So movement snacks are a system that my friend Jared Tavasolian and I created that basically they help calm and soothe your nervous system before you then start to do some moves that are going to give you more range of motion and mobility and more energy before you then start doing, quote, strength or more cardio or demanding moves. So movement snacks are a kind of traffic light where you get to so for example, a movement snack session always starts with 1 minute of breathing. 1 minute of nasal breathing, and it could be in different positions. It could be lying on your belly, lying on your back with your knees up. It could be standing, um, because we need to come back to that mind body unity of, okay, I was writing these emails, I was doing this thing, like, oh, that's a problem, I was thinking about this, I was thinking about that, and then it's like, right now, just for a few minutes, you are going to be connected to yourself. So it starts with 1 minute of diaphragmatic nasal breathing. Then there are different types of moves, which we would generalize and call nervous system resets. And so, what these moves are doing is they are soothing your nervous system to basically go, hey, you're safe. Nothing bad's going to happen. So, these are moves that could look like there's different types of rolling, segmental rolling on the floor, arm rolls, leg rolls, egg rolls. There's rocking back and forward. So, rocking is a very soothing movement for us. If we're in a hammock, on a swing, if it's a crying baby, you rock them. So, a lot of these soothing movements are related to child developmental movement patterns. And so, when we're born, we're kind of half baked. We don't have a kind of full nervous system. So, these kind of primitive reflexes are really wonderful for our nervous system. They were wonderful when we were 2 months old, and they're actually wonderful for us now at 40, 50, 60, 70, 80 years old. So we do some breathing, then we tell our body, like, hey, everything's fine, nothing bad's going to happen. And then we start to do other moves that are going to release tension because our body, like I said, we're a use it or lose it system. So if you spend a lot of day in your chair, your body's really good at being chair shaped. And because it gets very efficient at it. And so, but we don't want to move through the world being chair shaped. So you want to do moves that are going to release tension from being chair shaped and put you into other shapes. So this could be, like hip mobility drills, um, things for your neck, things for your spine, like connecting to your feet, all this kind of thing. And then we can start doing more movements where we're kind of on all fours or crawling and creating movement flows and things like that. So, and that's why I say a movement snack, it's there's a bit more to it than like an exercise break. And, is all movement good for you? Yes. If you've been sat in a chair for an hour and a half, thinking, focusing, concentrating, and I get it, like I've written a book, I've done a PhD, like I know what it's like to be in an intellectual flow and focused, and you don't want to be interrupted. But then there's also just kind of like sitting in the chair and looking online, you know,
Mhm.
doing this and that. And and then, if you wanted to go and run up and down the stairs, that is going to be of huge benefit for you. But that's not the same as building a sustainable movement practice where you can rebuild from the ground up and have this traffic light system. So the traffic light system is, so okay, so you've done your breathing, then you do these reset moves. And you should also be kind of like aware at the time of like, you know, does this feel good? Am I getting more energy? Because most of the time, if you feel too tired to move, you probably should move because movement is going to give you more energy. Movement is also going to increase your intellectual capacity and intellectual cognitive performance is improved by movement, by moving the body. So, there's a saying, if the mind's in a funk, send the body in to help.
Mm,
So, if I wake up and I'm thinking, okay, I'm going to move, or it's the middle of the day, and I'm like, okay, let me move. And I put my mat on the floor, or I go outside, I do some breathing, then I do some rocking, and then I do some hip mobility, and then I do some up and down from the ground. There are some days after I've done that, I'm like, I'm raring to go now. I'm like, I have so much energy. I want to go and do parkour. I want to do kettlebells. I want to do handstand training. I want. Like my body is hungry for more movement. But there's other days where it's like, nope, I'm good. And it's this kind of level of self knowledge of what kind of tired am I? Am I intellectually tired? Am I emotionally tired? Am I physiologically tired? Am I environmentally tired? Am I just dehydrated? Am did I, I haven't fully recovered from the things I did yesterday or 2 days ago, or you've been traveling and you're tired. So these movements in these sequences give us an insight into, I always say, meet yourself where you're at. But most people go like, what does that even mean? Like, what do you mean where I'm at? Like, do I need to just show up and push through? And I'm like, I don't know. You're the only one in your body. You're the only one who knows your story. You are the only one who knows how you feel right now. But if you cannot translate how you feel right now, then there's a chance that you may not be making good decisions about how much you should train, how much you should recover. And so they're this insight, they're a map into, I call it, like, it's like a treasure hunt, basically, of reveal and heal. How do you feel? What feels good? What's giving you more energy? And the other thing that I find, that I always introduce my clients to, is to really acknowledge when you feel good, because it feels good to feel good. But most of the time, we don't even acknowledge that. And if you're not acknowledging it, then you're not discovering what are the ingredients for me. So, like, I know, like, the perfect, environment for me, the perfect setup of how I'm going to feel and what moves I'm going to do. And whereas I meet a lot of women who, I tell them their strength, like their willpower, their ferocity of their mindset, their discipline, like that strength is a double edged sword. Just because you can push through doesn't mean it's a good idea. And just because you can push through and you do doesn't mean you didn't pay a price. And a lot of people, there's the kind of two camps of, I haven't moved a lot and now I think it's too late for me. And, the kind of, yeah, giving up a little bit, or it's almost like a mild depression, and it's a really big disconnect from their bodies. And I think it's easy as well to, especially if you've been in very intellectual pursuits, to dismiss the body as unimportant. And the body's unimportant until it kind of says, like, hey, you owe me. And now you're sick. And now someone's having to look after you. And you've lost independence. And you can't get up from the ground. You can't get up from your chair. That body then becomes pretty important in your value system. Um, so we want to really avoid that and have this self knowledge of, what do I need? How much? What feels good? What doesn't? So if you can't tell what kind of tired you are, these are the kind of investigations that a movement snacks approach can give you. So that was a very long answer to what a movement snacks.
I wanted to tell a story. So I recently came back from a big trip, which I do quite a lot, but I do listen to my body. And if I don't feel like exercising, I don't do it. But I went to my Monday nights, my body attack and then yoga class. I know you'd hate that probably, but anyway, I was yawning. I went in, I was so tired. I was yawning, but I knew I was listening to my body. I knew it was going to wake me up. And by the third track, I was totally alive. I was whooping. I had just
It's great.
reawakened. Yeah, I just needed it. I just
Yeah.
needed it. But I was listening to my body. Now, Julie, you do teach the MAPS system, the MAPS system.
Yeah.
Can you tell us what the letters stand for and why is it important, especially for women at midlife?
So the MAP system stands for movement snacks, age positive and adventure, parkour and play, and strong resting. And the reason why it's all of those things is because if one of those is missing, then you're not going to get the the end result of a sustainable movement practice that is going to make you happier, stronger, healthier, and give you the freedom to live life on your terms without kind of physical limitations, without, fears. I mean, of course, there can be limitations and of course, there can be fears. So say you have movement snacks. You're like, okay, I get up and regularly and I do this thing. Like there's coaches I know who are like, they set an alarm every 30 minutes. And like, I can't think of anything more annoying. If I'm in
Same.
a focus work thing, I'm like, you've never done focus work in your life. If you need to, and also you shouldn't have to, your body should be resilient enough to sit for an hour or so, like it's like, come on. So say you have these exercise breaks, this movement snack type thing, but you're never really um, adventurous, and you're still using self-critical language. Like you still refer to yourself as like, oh God, yeah, I feel like such an old bag, or God,
Mhm.
yeah, I'm this or that, and our body hears everything. If you're like, oh God, oh, my knee's so stiff, and like, oh God, I hate my left knee. My left knee is really annoying. So that left knee is probably working way harder than the right knee, which, you know, you're not slagging off, you're not putting down, you're not, that left knee is working so much harder. It needs so much more love. So this age positive um, mindset, I believe, is really important. The adventurous mindset, because also you could be doing a movement practice and then like, what happens when you get bored of it? What do you do next? So I want people to kind of be adventurous and to have adventures in life, like not just in the movement, but to keep going on adventures. And like, a walk around the block can be a new adventure if you have the right mindset. But if you don't, your movement practice can get boring, and your body can start like responding quite negatively if you're giving it negative feedback all the time. If you don't have parkour and play, again, you are going to hit a wall at some point. You are never going to have the joy of seeing the world as a playground. Play lights up the brain like nothing else. If you're tired and say you don't want to do something, but you go for, you're out on a picnic and someone's like, oh, do you want to throw a frisbee? Like, yeah. And then suddenly you're moving, you're playing because you're in that zone where it's the play, it's the game, it's the joy that is leading you, not, okay, like down on the floor, 10 push ups, da 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 da. Like it doesn't have to be boot camp, it can be playful and exploratory. And the strong resting piece is about this listening. It's about how are you breathing? How are you sleeping? How is your nutrition? It's the lost art of recovery. It's how we can regulate our nervous system, because when we move, we are literally like creating stressors that our body then has to adapt to. We're breaking down the tissues. But the rebuild, the get strong bit, only happens when we rest. So this relationship between,
Yeah.
it's two sides of the coin. And most people are just, like I meet so many women that they don't even eat lunch. And I'm like, what do you mean you don't eat lunch? Like, what happened to lunch? When did
Mhm.
lunch stop being a thing? And and they're like, oh, but I can't build muscle. And it's like, well, you've stopped giving your body the ingredients to even have the possibility. of building muscle. If you're overtraining and under recovering, there's a simple trajectory, which is a negative path of diminishing returns from your effort. So when people say, like, I'm stuck, I've tried everything, no one can figure it out, I have never had a one to one call with someone and they tell me what they do and there's a mystery. There's no mystery. If you have the map system, if you are ticking off all these approaches of consistency that is adaptable and creative, that works for you and your lifestyle and meets you where you're at right now, number one, do you have the mindset and belief that you are capable of change? Do you have a playful and, again, adaptable approach to this movement practice? And number three, do you give yourself the recovery you need relative to the work that you're doing? And the thing is, we are different every day. So, you may have a movement plan that's like, well, Monday, Wednesday, Friday, this is what I do. And, if I don't do Wednesdays, then I'm obviously a rubbish person and I'm weak and I'm da 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 da. But the thing is, you may get to Wednesday. If you're really sore and really tired, it's kind of like punching yourself in the face when you've already got a black eye. It's like, why would you do that?
Yeah.
And so stress management is the kind of overall umbrella of strong resting. And again, people don't understand or are confused about chronic stress versus the acute stressors of movement and exercise, which cause adaptation, versus I'm constantly underslept, overcaffeinated, inactive, eat processed food. It's like there's no mystery why you are feeling stiff, stuck, tired, and unmotivated. It's a very normal response to those set of circumstances. And then the question is always then, so what can I do next? What can I do to shift that? And I go back to it starts with a single breath. It starts with how you breathe. It can start with one simple step of like, I'm going to stand up and, you know, walk to the kitchen and back. And then you have to promise yourself you're going to do that every single day, because none of this without consistency will make a difference. And that's why I'm a big fan of, like, if you want big change, you need to start really small, because there's a kind of like philosophy called the slight edge. And it was actually a coach of mine who shared it with me. And I believe there's a book of the same title. And it's basically, there are these tiny things which are so small, they feel very insignificant. And they're actually so small that it's easy for us to disregard them and not do them. So it could be like, okay, when you wake up in the morning, um, step outside, whether it's your front doorstep, your back garden, your balcony. Like, all of us can access outsideness in some way, shape, or form, where there is daylight that is setting your biological clock, helping with your circadian health. And so if you say you need to, like, on day one, right, to begin with, I want you to spend 1 minute outside within an hour of waking up. And someone has to, be pretty, and of course there are exceptions, and someone could be like, yeah, but Julie, I broke my leg and I'm on this. I'm like, okay, okay, okay. But that pregnant nun, that master of manipulation of our own minds, we are our own biggest obstacle, which isn't to say there is not hardship across so many things, but there is always there is always 1 minute of something that you can do. And then if you're prepared to repeat it, it could be, I'm going to do 1 minute of nasal breathing. That, make your exhale longer than your inhale. Just that for 1 minute can create change. And then when you do that every day and you've decided this slight edge is like, okay, it seems stupid, but I'm going to do it anyway, then you have consistency, then you start to see and feel the difference. And that's why, yeah, if you want change, you need to think really small at the beginning, especially if you're stuck. And then the other things, there's two other things that I found in my experience when I've wanted to do something or change something, is simply support and accountability. So I've done, like, friends of mine who are like health coaches. They were like, "Oh, do you want to do Whole 30?" It's just like, 30 days. You cut out loads of things, and you basically just eat meat, fish, eggs, vegetables, and good fats. And it sounds like, okay, if you're a relatively healthy eater, it doesn't sound that bad, but it's really inconvenient, it's really annoying, and you still go through all these things. On, like, day 2, you feel like you have a hangover because you haven't had sugar. On day 4, you feel angry. On day 6, like, and so a friend guided us through it. And during that experience, I realized, like, wow, if you give me enough support and accountability, I can do anything. And I've kind of taken that approach in the coaching and in the map system. So the map system is really, it's the best of everything I've learned over the past 25 years, from filmmaking, from being in these different movement cultures, from going through perimenopause, from being postmenopausal, from the laboratory of life, of, like, oh, I tried that and I found this. And so, yeah, it's a very holistic, adaptable, creative system. And I think anything that isn't creative and adaptable has little chance of working for midlife women, because it's just a wild roller coaster for a lot of people for a lot of the time.
I absolutely agree with you about the baby steps. This is what I tell women all the time who haven't been doing anything. They've just got to take it small. Now, Julie, you mentioned aging a few times, and just to finish off, you were one of the wise women who I interviewed for my book, and everything you've said, I've got chapters on in the book. But when I asked you about aging, you said, I'm going to read your quote. Aging is the wonderful tapestry of life. My mum's going to turn 84. She plays 3 rounds of golf a week, every week. She lives on her own. She's widowed. And I know people who are in their 60s who are in elite physical performance. If you want to be really good at dying, you need to be really good at living. So, Julie, anything else you want to add there about how we can change people's such negative view about aging? Because you and I don't feel like that. We feel bloody great. I feel amazing.
Yeah, 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 yeah. I mean, other than just to say, like, I really love my mum, um, but also to say, like, my mum's really a kind of interesting case in point, because she's never been sporty. She was never active, but she walks, she gardens. And then my dad was a golfer, and she was, she used to say she was a golf widow, and then she's like, can't beat them, join them. And she found other women to go and learn golf with. She was like, oh, I'm never going to be any good at it, but she was doing it, and she was doing it for the joy of doing it. And I think that's the message of, find things that bring you joy, and then you can start to see, feel, witness, and share these this beautiful tapestry of life. Because it's, it can be, I think, very hard for people who don't have um, those references. They don't get to see that. And, like, my mum will never refer to herself as old. And I asked her why one day, and she just said, I don't think it's helpful. And I was like, yeah, I like that. And the thing is, so she's 84, playing 3 rounds of golf. She plays golf with women who are 87. And, so it's, I think I agree with her. Like we age more from age 0 to 5 in terms of change than we do from, like, 40 to 45. And my approach to aging is that it's opportunities for more research. You get to see what works for you and what doesn't. If you know you're doing things that aren't working for you, then you have to decide, am I ready and willing to do things differently? Because doing things differently takes more change than doing same, same. I wish that weren't the case, but it is. So, yeah, I love my mum. I'm really grateful for her. And I just loved it when she was like, the way that a lot of people refer to themselves in their aging, she's like, no, it's not helpful. So I'm sticking with that.
Yeah, and fill up your social media feed, everyone, with these brilliant videos. I was watching a 98-year-old guy jumping on a step this morning. So there are so many inspiring people out there who are much older than us who are putting stuff out, and it's really great to watch. And the London Marathon, where the oldest participant was talking to the youngest participant, and the youngest one, I think she was 18,
Oh,
said to the
nice.
83-year-old, "You beat me," and I was like, "Yes, that's just so." We need inspiration from
Excellent.
people ahead of us for sure. Now, Julie, just to finish off, the final questions I ask all my guests, and I did ask you this when I interviewed you for the book, but you can answer however you want. Julie, what makes you happy, and where is your happy place?
Oh, it's easy. My happy place is um, a sunrise walk with my dog and then swimming in the sea.
I'm with you there. I'm
I know
with
I
you
didn't probably
there.
say that for I don't remember what I said for the book interview, but that's at the forefront of my mind right now.
Yeah, it absolutely can change for sure. And the very, very last question, again, I've asked you this before for the book, but what advice would you give your younger self?
Oh, keep not giving a shit. 100%.
Yay. And it's much easier as you get older. You give less shit as you get older.
Definitely. Yeah, I mean, I'm definitely rebel archetype, but I think that yeah, you see things with the bullshit filter where you're just like, no, you've lived enough to kind of go, I don't really need to believe that, and I think that's nonsense, and I'm just gonna quietly be over here doing my thing differently. Thank you very much.
On that note, Julie, it's a brilliant, brilliant place to finish. And I hope people listening who have been in any doubt about creativity, about movement, and about rest, obviously thinking about the map system, uh, please follow Julie, get some inspiration. I want everyone to fill their feed with people like Julie. Seeing you out there doing your movement is just great. And I'm sure, well, it does help so many women. So thank you, Julie, so much for coming on the podcast today.
Oh, pleasure. And thank you for all the work you're doing and the message you're sharing as well with all the other collaborators.